Okay, so we're gonna try this tonight. But my eyes, there was like a floater in my eye earlier, and so my eyes are wonky. As you can tell, I'm wearing glasses to read tonight. But oh my god, everything is so wonky donkey. So I apologize. I, I break out every pair of glasses that I have because for some reason I have like a headache behind this part of my eye. So I'm like reading it like this. But I don't like that one either. I like this one. These ones better. I think I can see better. Wow. Okay. So I hope everybody had a good Labor Day weekend. I hope it was filled with all the fun whatevers you do during Labor Day weekends. I just kind of chill at home. I'm kind of homebody with that. So, although we did take a trip to IKEA this weekend, and I don't recommend that on a holiday. This is a weird ring light behind me. I'm sorry, but like I said, for some reason my eyes are like all wonky right now, and I don't know if it's because I did not wear sunglasses out today, and I'm like, did I burn my eyeball? So, if you're just joining us, no, that's a little better. If you're just joining us, I read Project 2025 out loud. I read it here live on TikTok. Usually I'm live over on Twitter Spaces right now, but I'm charging my other phone and I'm good. But if you miss it, I also upload what I read to my YouTube channel, and that link is in my Shmio. So we are just about, we're a little more than a third of the way through, and we're starting on chapter 11, the Department of Education. And this one is one that is, as I've glanced over, it has just, it's fucking crazy. It's absolutely insane to me. Because the things that they talk about and the things that they want to do and get rid of, and it's a wild ride. And the first section in this talks about ESA funds, which affect Arizona, which is the state I live in. And anytime that you have ESA funds, which is like school vouchers for choice, you can take those funds out of a public school and online school, homeschool, private tuition, home, whatever you want. But it takes that money out of the community. So it's not always, I'm touch and go with it. I'm touch and go with it for a couple of reasons. And the only reason I say that is because there are some things that it does benefit. But in the long run, school vouchers don't work when they take money away from like Title I schools. It simply doesn't work. And what happens when you have ESA funds is schools raise tuition. They raise the acceptance rate. They raise it so they have all the students that they need, but then there's another fee. So there's a lot of things that get tacked onto this. And I've seen a lot of different parents from different like homeschooling situations in private schools use this money for what I would never consider something to be educational. And I'm like, you can use those funds for that? And they're like, yeah. And it's just, some of it just doesn't make sense to me. And when they talk about the Department of Education, they want to completely abolish the Department of Education. They want it gone. We've talked about this before because it's about control. Control what you teach, control what you say, control the teachers. Don't let them teach real history. Oh, thank you for the heart, Grammy. I appreciate you. It is a way to, again, separate classes. So the haves from the have-nots, and the have-nots get pushed really far down to the haves. So if you're following along, it is, again, Chapter 11, Department of Education. We're starting on page 319. I'm going to try to read this. Like I said, I have this weird floater. It's in my right eye. Like I could see it, but like I keep doing like this number. So let's get started, shall we? And let's see if I can read. I might have to switch. That might be a little bit better. I'm not a big fan of these glasses because they drown me out, but this might be a little better. Okay. Federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. That is the first sentence. Page 319. Mission. federal education policy should be limited, and ultimately, the Federal Department of Education should be eliminated. There are so many reasons why that is a bad fucking idea. First of all, when you eliminate Federal Department of Education, things like IEPs and is it 501s? They don't have to abide by those, especially for like special needs kids or children who have additional needs in school who have things like IEPs. When you only have state funding, you do not have to follow an IEP because it is not federally funded. Think about that. So now you've got a whole different subsect of people, nonverbal children, autistic children, cerebral palsy, any kind of child that would need assistance via IEP. They don't have to be followed if there's no federal money. This is why money, ESA for the state, so school of choice, and how you choose as a parent to parent, homeschool, online, alternative, whatever the case may be, why that is bad. Because there will be others who are disabled or have different abilities that need federal funds to make sure that they have aids, one-on-one assistance, accommodations. And when you take away federal funds, you don't have to service those children. Think about that for just a minute. That first fucking sentence is so important, and that is a big reason why. So you have a child that has any kind of different or disability, physical, mental, handicapped, whatever it is, and needs accommodations through their is it 504s? I think it's 504s. Excuse me. My phone is charging, but I'm not very versed in 504. Yes. Okay. So it's the 504 plans and the IEPs. If you do not have, I kept calling it 501. I keep thinking of 501c. So 504s and IEPs that allow those services to be in schools and allow those accommodations and allow that to be in school is because of federal funds. When you don't have federal funds, you do not have to follow guidelines for 504s and IEPs. And that is dangerous. So we've talked about keeping people dumb. We've also talked about people who need additional assistance to basically say, get fucked. That's what that says. So if you don't have a shit ton of money, if you don't have a private school in your area, if you don't have donors or grants and scholarships, and you happen to have an accommodation that needs to be met, but your school is private because they don't have a Department of Education anymore, or it's like Arizona, it's state funded, you're going to have a lot of people who are never going to be educated. And that is absolutely never going to happen. Absolutely never going to happen. And for everybody, again, when you come to my comments, people will always say Trump 2024 happens all the time. Totally fine. Let them talk. Everybody talks shit about my looks. Everybody says he's already said this isn't his agenda. It is absolutely this man's fucking agenda. We have 15 sleeps until this stupid son of a bitch is going to be sentenced, and it's going to be glorious. So I'm going to keep reading this because 2025, the only person they had on deck really was Trump, and he's not going to win for shit. So let me just read their playbook, because Project 2025 is just going to turn into Project 2029 at this point. So we might as well keep going so that we don't become that way, right? First sentence out the gate. When power is exercised, it should empower students and families, not government. In our pluralistic society, families and students should be free to choose from a diverse set of school options and learning environments that best fit their need. That's a fucking lie. Best fit their family's nuclear Christian family values. That's what they're referring to. Our post-secondary institutions should also reflect such diversity with room for not only traditional liberal arts, colleges, and research universities, but also faith-based institutions, career schools, military academies, and lifelong learning programs. But did you see what they did there? Oh, in lieu of tradition, we're going to say military. We're going to say trade. We're going to say career schools. Faith-based institutions. They do not mean faith-based. They mean Christian-based. Again, elementary and secondary education policy should follow the path outlined by Milton Friedman in 1955, where an education is publicly funded, but education decisions are made by families. Okay, there's a bit of a difference between what we knew in 1955 and today. Technology, things evolving, So it's, I don't know if I would go back to something that was done in 1955 and say, education back then versus education now. Ultimately, every parent should have the option to direct their child's share of education funding through education savings accounts, ESAs, funded overwhelmingly by state and local taxpayers, which would empower parents to choose a set of education options that meet their child's unique needs. No. What meets your needs in your rich ass communities? What you get to be able to take away from schools? Would you be able to take away from Title I to fund private? It's I can see where there would be some benefit to it, some discretion. But when you're saying just abolish the whole Department of Education, that just means that you really don't give a shit about kids anyway. I mean, last chapter we talked about getting rid of WIC, getting rid of school lunch meals unless 40% of the population, blah, 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 blah. So you don't want free lunch. You want forced labor. And now you don't want kids to be able to go to whatever school their Christian parents tell them to go to. Got it. States are eager to lead in the K-12 education. For decades, they have acted independently of the federal government to pioneer a variety of constructive reforms and school choice programs. For example, in 2011, Arizona first piloted ESAs, which provide families roughly 90% of what the state would have spent on that child in public schools to be used instead on education options such as private school, tuition, online courses, and tutoring. In 2022, Arizona expanded the program to be available to all families. The future of education, freedom, and reforms in the states is bright and will shine brighter when regulations and red tape from Washington are eliminated. Federal money is inevitably accompanied by rules and regulations that keep the influx of funds from having much, if any, impact on the student outcomes. That is such a bold-faced lie, and they know it. That is just bullshit. When you have rules and regulations, it means there's inclusion. It means everybody's involved. It means it doesn't matter where you started from, super dirt poor or ultimately rich, everybody deserves an education. And that is what the rules and regulations refer to. We will like the rules and regulations because it means everybody gets an education. Everybody has an equal opportunity for the pursuit of happiness, in Bill of Rights, Constitution, shit like that, It raises the cost of education without raising students' achievement. That's a lie. To the extent that federal taxpayer dollars are used to fund education programs, those funds should be block granted to states without strings, eliminating the need for many federal and state bureaucrats. Eventually, policymaking and funding should take place at the state and local levels closest to the affected families. Well, thanks a lot, Heart Hannah. I appreciate you. Join our team. So with this, it should be state, local, and federal. Thank you, Hannah, for the vote sticker. I appreciate you. It should be all three. That's the checks and balances. It just shouldn't be state and local. It should also be federal because you need to make sure that all means all. Although student loans and grants should ultimately be restored to the private sector, or at the very least, the federal government should revisit its role as guarantor rather than direct lender, federal post-secondary education investment should bolster economic growth, and recipient institutions should nourish academic freedom and embrace intellectual diversity. No, they don't want to embrace intellectual diversity because they want to take out DEI programs from college. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. This has not, however, been the track record of the federal higher education policy or the many institutions of higher education that are hostile to free expression, open academic inquiry, and American exceptionalism. College is about finding yourself, finding out who you are, what makes you tick. Is it trade school? Is it a university? Is it a community college? Whatever the post-secondary education should be something that you would want to do. So of course it should foster that. That doesn't even... It is a track record. It's kind of your time to find out who you are, time to shine. Halo, how are you? Federal post-secondary policy should be more than massive, inefficient, and open-ended subsidies to traditional colleges and universities. It should be rebalanced to focus on far more bolstering of the workforce skills of Americans who have no interest in pursuing a 4-year academic degree. Right there. Workforce. That is exactly what they're talking about. I'm going to read it one more time. Federal post-secondary policy should be more than massive, inefficient, and open-ended subsidies to traditional colleges and universities. So first talk shit about it and then say where the money goes. It said it should be rebalanced to focus far more on bolstering the workforce skills of Americans who have no interest in pursuing a 4-year academic degree. Workforce. They're trying to create the next workforce. Why do you think they're all about babies, 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 babies? Abortion isn't healthcare. Abortion isn't healthcare. Ban abortions, ban abortions. Why do you think they're talking about no-fault marriages? Trying to end no-fault marriages. Trying to keep you in marriages. Trying to keep you. It gets more sinister. This only gets more sinister as we keep diving in. The first part was this big balloon of everything that we're talking about as far as like all of the White House and staff and council and this big, but this is us. This is who they're referring to. Creating a workforce. It should reflect the fuller picture of learning after high school, placing apprenticeship programs on all types and careers and technical education on an even playing field with degrees from colleges and universities. Rather than continuing to buttress a higher education establishment captured by woke diversicrats, that's a new one, and a de facto monopoly enforced by federal accreditation cartel, federal post-secondary... Oh, look at the corgi booty. Thank you, Bucks, for the corgi booty. Corgi booties. Too cute. Diversicrats. And a de facto monopoly enforced by the federal accreditation cartel. Federal post-secondary education policy should prepare students for jobs in the dynamic economy, nurture institutional diversity, and expose schools to greater market forces. So when you take money away and you abolish the Department of Education and you try to put as much money as you can into trade schools, but talk shit about colleges and universities, there will always be a need on both sides, on every side, on every job. Every time we lose a generation, we lose that type of skill set. So yes, there will always be red and blue collar workers, or white and blue collar workers, always. But putting the emphasis in saying that we have to get rid of the Department of Education because we're not talking about American exceptionalism and colleges being too woke is absolutely bullshit. Go to any college. Go to any major college campus, especially right now. They are running Rush. They are running sororities. They are running groups because they're trying to find out who they are as a person. Oh, Halo coming in with the tags. I appreciate you, girl. But just saying that colleges and universities are too woke just means they're highly educated. They want a workforce. So if I take away also ESA funds and you go to a private school and it's a Christian private school, they may only teach this, this, and this. So they may be teaching you a trade from a very young age, grooming you. You could be like, okay, well, all the girls in this Christian school go to home ec. Home ec. Because at a private school, they don't have state, or they have state funds, but they don't have federal. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. For most of our history, the federal government played a minor role in education. Then over just a 14-month period beginning in 1964, Congress planted the seeds for what would become the U.S. Department of Education, ED, or the department. In July of that year, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964 after Congress reached a consensus that the mistreatment of Black Americans was no longer tolerable and merited a federal response. Yes, exactly. Civil rights. what they're trying to roll back. In the case of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965, ESEA 2, and the Higher Education Act of 1965, EGA 3, Congress sought to improve educational outcomes for disadvantaged students by providing additional compensatory funding for low-income children and low-income college students to level the playing field for inclusion for all. Go look how many schools were segregated up until 1964. Shit. 70s and 80s for some of y'all. And this was allowing everyone to have an education, no matter where you came from, no matter where you started, based on the content of your character, not the color of your skin. You could have an education because they realized, maybe we need to make everybody educated and stop being systemically racist on a ridiculous fucking level. Oh, shock. Shock that everybody should want to be educated. Spending on the ESEA and the HEA, part of the Johnson's War on Poverty, grew exponentially in the years that followed. By fiscal 2022, ESEA programs received $27.7 billion in appropriations, in addition to the $190 billion through the pandemic's elementary schools emergency relief ESSER funds. Okay, we are not going to do this. You're going to talk about, okay, so from then on, from 65 until the pandemic, if there's a need for funding for education and it's an emergency, hello. The same year, the department spent more than $2 billion just to administer Title IV of the HEA, which authorizes federal student loans and Pell Grants. It provided $22.5 billion in Pell Grants and oversaw outlays of close to $100 billion in the direct student loans. Since 1965, Congress has contributed to, sorry, my eyes get wonky. Since 1965, Congress continued to layer on dozens of new laws and programs as federal solutions to a myriad of education problems. In 1973, it passed the Rehabilitation Act, and in 1975, the Individuals with Disability Education Act, IDEA, to address educational neglect of students with disabilities. Exactly. Keep going. In 2002, it created the Institute of Education Sciences and consolidated education data collection and fund research. Congress also enacted a series of Charles D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Acts, including the Perkins v. in 2018. Congress could have and once did distribute management of federal education programs outside of a single department. But for those interested in expanding federal funding and influence education, this unconsolidated approach was less than ideal because every single captive agency would allow them to promote their agenda more effectively across administrations. Eventually, the National Education Association made a deal and backed the right presidential candidate, Jimmy Carter, who successfully lobbied and delivered on cabinet-level agency. Exactly. Jimmy Carter is very pro-education. When it was established in 1979, becoming operational in 1980, the agency was supposed to act as a corralling mechanism. Carter signed the Department of Educational Organization Act into law in 1979, believing in part that it would reduce administrative costs and improve efficiency by housing most of the federal education programs that had proliferated in the wake of Johnson's War on Poverty under one roof. Organizational, when it's all here and the money's not just going everywhere, is better. So, yes, again, Jimmy Carter always for the win. I am a Jimmy Carter, always have been a Jimmy Carter fan. I was born when Jimmy Carter was president. And again, here's where they're going to talk shit about it. It had the opposite effect. Instead, special interest groups like the National Education Association, the NEA, the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, and the Higher Education Lobby have leveraged the agency to continuously expand federal expenditures, a desirable funding stream from their vantage point because federal budgets are not constrained like state and local budgets that must be balanced each year. Yes. By fiscal year 2022, the department's discretionary and mandatory appropriations toppled $80 billion, not including the student loan outlays. Each of its programs had attended a federal string with red tape. By the way, guys, I apologize if I don't see your gifts. I thank you for them. They are never expected. They are greatly appreciated. I do kind of see them out of the corner of my eye, but sometimes it goes so fast and I'm reading. So if you gift me, I apologize if I'm not seeing it. I do see it later and I do appreciate you. So thank you for that. I love you guys. It's amazing that I get to do this and I can read all of this. And for you, again, if you want a gift, that's great. If I don't mention it, I apologize. I do see them later. So always remember that. One recent example of the Biden administration requirement is that state education and their school districts submit equity plans as a condition of receiving COVID recovery, the ESSER funds in the American Rescue Plan, ARP. This exercise led to the hiring of numerous new government employees as the rules were promulgated. Plans were created after collecting public feedback, and those plans were eventually deemed satisfactory. Again, I'm not finding the problem with this because we're talking about trying to navigate a pandemic and also make sure that everyone has funding to be able to be educated and to teach and to try to figure out how that's all going to work from preschoolers on up through post-secondary. Like, it affected the whole world. So we changed. So, and then you're saying, okay, equity plans, exactly. We should all be able to have equity when it comes to education. Just because there's a pandemic, poor shouldn't have to suffer just because there's a pandemic. The next administration will need to plan to redistribute the various congressionally approved federal education programs across the government, eliminate those that are ineffective or duplicative, and then eliminate the unproductive red tape and rules by entrusting state and districts with flexible, formula-driven block grants. This chapter details that plan. Okay. Hey, you. Sorry, speaking to my husband, I apologize. As the next administration executes its work, it should be guided with a few core principles, including advancing education freedoms. Empowering families to choose among a diverse set of educational options is key to reform and improved outcomes and can be achieved without establishing new federal program. For example, portability of existing federal education spending to fund families directly or allowing federal tax credits to encourage voluntary contributions to K-12 education savings accounts managed by charitable nonprofits could significantly advance education choice. Number 2, providing education choice with federal children. Congress has a special responsibility to children who are connected to military families who live in the District of Columbia or who are members of sovereign tribes. Responsibility for serving these students should be housed in agencies that are already serving these families. No. Restoring local and state control over education funding. As Washington begins to downsize its intervention in education, existing funding should be sent to states as grants over which they have full control, enabling states to put federal funding toward any lawful education purpose under the law. Treating taxpayers like investors in federal student aid. Taxpayers should expect their investments in higher education to generate economic productivity. Oh, no. When the federal government lends money to individuals for a post-secondary education, taxpayers should expect those borrowers to repay. Okay, first of fucking all. That's some bullshit. Just because somebody goes to college, do you know how many people I know go to college who don't just get one degree and they go back and get a completely different career set? So, because taxpayer funds post-secondary education through federal programs, you want to generate economic productivity. So so they're pissed about student loans being paid off. Because there are people who are for a generation now never going to own homes because they were so inundated with student loan debt, thinking that all your life you're told that secondary education is important, college is important. You got to get a job, you got to go to college. To get a job, you got to go to college. So drilled into everybody's brain, and then tack on these ridiculous rates, and people paying for 10, 15, 20 years and barely making a dent. You're pissed off about education? Tax fucking churches. Tax churches. Don't give Elon tax breaks. How about that? I bet you that pays for a shit ton. Protecting the federal student loan portfolio from predatory politicians. The new administration must end the practice of acting like the federal student loan portfolio is a campaign fund to curry political support and votes. The new administration must end abuses in loan forgiveness programs. Borrowers should be expected to repay their loans. How many times has Donnie gone bankrupt? I'll wait. 6. He's been expected to repay. Never. But you want a child who is 18 years old who takes out a loan because they think they have to get it to get a job, and then changes career paths and is inundated with debt even though they have a fucking master's degree, is somehow has to be held more to the fire than the fucking former president? Fuck off. Fuck off. Make school fucking free. How about that? How about you want a workforce? Pay for it. School is free. Fund it all. Fund it all. Tax the churches, fund the colleges. See how that works? That's pretty Christ-like, don't you think? That's pretty much what Jesus would do, don't you think? I think so. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. Let's see, shall we? Safeguarding civil rights. Enforcement of civil rights should be based on a proper understanding of those laws. Rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory. So you want to safeguard white rights, right? Safeguard, page 322 if you're following along. The Department of Education, safeguarding civil rights. Enforcement of civil rights should be used based on proper understanding of those laws. Rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory. So again, I'm going to ask, what about that doesn't sound like straight white Christians? What about that doesn't sound rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory is not safeguarding civil rights. It's saying, I, being of porcelain skin, am better than you because I'm straight and white and married to a man with 7 kids. It's fucking bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. Stop executive overreach. Congress should set policy, not presidents through pen and phone executive orders, and not agencies through regulations and guidance. National emergency declaration should expire absent express congressional authorization within 60 days after the date of declaration. Bolstered by an ever-growing cabal of special interests that thrive off federal largesse and the infrastructure that supports Americans' costly federal intervention in education from early childhood through graduate school has entrenched itself. But unlike the public sector bureaucracies, public employee unions and higher education lobby families and students do not need the Department of Education to learn, grow, and improve their lives. It is critical that the next administration tackle the entrenched infrastructure. Again, we're not getting rid of the Department of Education, so get it out your ass. Get it out your... Look, you can sit up there on a high horse and you can try to say that this is never going to happen, but they have been plotting and trying to put this in since Carter. This is Donnie's plan. You can sit up there and say that it's not, and every fucking day. So the next administration, what will be the next administration in 2025? Who would it be? That would be Donnie, who will not be. Needed reforms. Federal intervention in education has failed to promote student achievement after trillions spent since 1965 on the collective program now housed within the walls of the department. Student academic outcomes remain stagnant. On the main National Assessment of Education Programs, NAEP, reading outcomes for the 2020 administration have remained unchanged for the past 30 years. Declines in math performance are even more concerning than students' lack of progress on reading outcomes. 4th and 8th grade math scores saw the largest decline since the assessment were first administered in 1990. Average 4th grade math scores declined 5 points. Average 8th grade math scores declined 8 points. Just 1/3 of 8th graders nationally are proficient in reading and math. Just 27% of 8th graders are proficient in math in 2022, and 31% of 8th graders are proficient in reading in 2022. So your plan, because education is declining and there are areas that need help, is to get rid of the Department of Education? The fuck? Hi, I'm hungry. Well, get rid of the food. You don't have to eat. Well, that doesn't cure the problem. The NAEP long-term trend assessment shows academic stagnation since the 1970s, with a particular stagnation in the reading scores of 13-year-old students since 1971, when the assessment was first administered. Math scores, through modestly improved, are still lackluster. Additionally, the department has created a shadow Department of Education operating in states across the country. Federal mandates, programs, and proclamations have spurred hiring sprees among the state education agencies. More than 48,000 employees currently on staff in the state agency across the country. Those employees are more than 10 times the number of the employees, 4,400 at the Federal Department of Education, and their jobs largely entail reporting back to Washington. Research conducted by the Heritage Foundation's Jonathan Butcher finds that federal agency government funds 41% of the salary costs of the state education agencies. Now, the next couple of pages is just talking about trends in 4th and 8th grade reading. It's all charts. There's nothing to read. It just basically says 8th grade from 92 was like 260, and then it was up to like 270, back down to 260. They're just talking about average scores. So it's trends in 4th and 8th grade, 8th grade reading average scores, 4th grade reading average scores, and they went down in the 2000s. Now they're back trending up. That doesn't even make sense, because it goes, if you look at page 324, it goes against what they're saying. I mean, yes, there's up and downs, and there's a pretty big sharp turn right there at 2022, but the last time they took it was 2019. So what happened in 2020? A fucking pandemic. And everybody was scrambling, trying to figure out how to get children educated, but stay at home and do it virtually. So I can almost understand why there is a gap in some of these numbers, because they all kind of just trended up and down up a little bit, and then there's a tank, and you see it, but you're seeing it because it says 2020 or 2019 and then 2022 with the two sharp declines from reading and math, because the only common denominator in there is the fucking pandemic. I said what I said. This bloat has persisted for decades. It's not. And if you look at their scores that they're referring to, the only downticks that were really bad, we saw like a sharp thing kind of do this in 4th grade reading back in 98 to 2000. That could have just been a Y2K shit or whatever. But the biggest downtrends, when I'm looking at this, and if you take a look at it for yourself, is just the pandemic. There's nothing else that guides that. Yes, sir. Sorry. I have my husband's drink. Love you. In 1998, the commission led by the Representative Pete Hoekstra released a critical report on extensive fieldwork interviews and analysis of the Department of Education. The report, Education at a Crossroads, What Works and What's Wasted in Education Today, detailed the suffocating bureaucrats' red tape Carter's agency had wrapped around the states. The commission estimated that the states completed nearly 50 million hours of paperwork just to get the federal education spending, which at the time they estimated resulted in just 65 to 70 cents of each federal taxpayer dollar making its way to the classroom. The situation has only worsened since the Hoekstra report. Most recent evidence of the Washington bureaucratic paperwork burden can be found in the growing number of non-teaching staff in public schools across the country, which doubled with relative growth to the student enrollment from 1992 to 2015. The labyrinthian nature of the federal government education programs, convoluted funding formulas, competitive grant applications, reporting requirements, etc., has likely contributed to the considerable bureaucratic bloat in the state and local districts across the country, is one of the key areas that needs reform. This is all Moms for Liberty bullshit. All of this is. It's all gobbledygook, blah, 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 fucking word salad. It's streamlining existing programs and funding it so that dollars are sent to the states throughout straightforward per pupil allocations in the form of grants that states can put toward lawful education purposes under each state would bring in need of the easing for federal compliance burden. Keep the federal compliance. The compliance is there as a checks and balance. I hate this. The federal government should confine its involvement in education policy to that of statistics gathering agencies that decimates information to the states. No. We need to step in because then there will be people who won't be educated. Watch. You eliminate the Department of Education, and any of those children who are not considered normal, dryer setting. Look at the goose. Oh, she's stunning. Thanks, Halo. Now I'm just totally sidetracked. The students that are normal dryer setting kids from wealthier families will always have the advantage if you get rid of this. And they know that. It's why they do this. It's why they ran on school boards and failed. It's why even dipshit the other day was doing a Moms for Liberty interview. She's like, so great. The same when he went on stage and was like, oh, your kids go to school one day and they come home because they've had an operation. Then years later they ask why. There has never been one fucking school in the history of fucking everdom that a child has gone to school and been like, I identify as a boy, but I was born a girl. And then come home that same day and was a total fucking dude. And then 20 years later was like, what did they do to me in third grade, motherfucker? It has never happened. It's never happened and it never will. But they said on stage like, oh, he's the greatest he's a fucking moron. That doesn't even even for Moms for Liberty to be like, that is fucking batshit. But if we don't clap and do what he says when he says it, I will never understand. They're just trying to get their agenda across. Yay. Yep, kids go to school and they have surgeries. No fucking child ever has. Show me one, because you're a fucking liar. There's never been one child gone to school one day as one sex, come home the next day as a different sex, and regretted it 20 years later. Those things literally, none of those things happen together anyway, let alone in school. I don't know what school you went to, but that's not how it's ever been done. Let me see. To improve educational opportunities for all Americans, the next administration should work with Congress to pass the Department of Education Reorganization Act to reform, eliminate, or move the department's programs and offices and appropriate agencies. The following is an overview of what should happen within each of the offices and to each of the programs currently operated by the department. So now they're going to drill down. Program and office prioritization within the department. The Office of the Elementary and Secondary Education, OESE. The OESE is comprised of 36 programs ranging from Title I, Part A of the Elementary and Secondary Education and Impact Aid to programs for Native American students and the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program. This is what they want to do. They want to reduce the number of programs managed by the OESE and transfer some remaining programs to other federal agencies. They also want to transfer Title I, Part A, which provides federal funding to lower income school districts to the Department of Health and Human Services, specifically the Administration for Children and Families. It should be administered as a no strings attached formula block grant. They're fucking lying when they're talking about this, because everything they talked about, the Department of Health and Human Services talks about children and families. It does not talk about WIC. It talks about nuclear families. It means having a mom, a dad, many children, white Christian children. That is exactly what they're referring to. And if you think I'm kidding, go back one chapter. Go back to chapter 10, look at the Department of Agriculture and see all the cuts that they want to fucking make with HHS, with the Department of Agriculture, with food programs, with school lunches, with school breakfast, with funding. Every child who goes to school should get to eat regardless of income status. I don't give a damn if you're homeless, houseless, broke, got 94 kids, or you're Bill Gates' fucking kid. If you're in fucking school, school lunches should be free. Food should be free because you are a child and you cannot work. And they want to force labor and they want to be like, no, we'll go to this school because then you'll have to do what we say. Do you see how this all works out? So you want to transfer Title I, the poorest of the poor, Part A, to fucking the Department of Health and Human Services. And then you want to gut all their fucking programs. Fucking monsters. You're monsters. Restore revenue responsibility to Title I funding to the states over a 10-year period. So now we want no federal funding. You want it to go back to the Department of Health, but then you want them to eliminate it, go back to a state level and tell kids who are underprivileged to fuck off. That's amazing. Awesome. Jesus. OESE currently manages the Federal Impact Aid Program, which provides funding to school districts to compensate for reduction in property tax revenue due to the presence of federal property, such as associated with military base or tribal lands. They want to eliminate impact aid not tied to students. They want to move student-driven impact aid to the Department of Defense Education Authority, DODEA, or the Department of Interior Bureau of Indian Education. No. Transfer all Indian education programs to the Bureau of Indian Education. The DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, which provides vouchers to low-income children living in the nation's capital, appropriate as DC and is under jurisdiction of Congress, should be expanded into the universal program formula funded by the Department of Health and Human Services, which means, again, they won't have an education. All other programs of the OESE should be block granted or eliminated. That's just one fucking office. Okay, what's next? The Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education. Transfer the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education few programs to the Department of Labor. And move tribally controlled post-secondary career and technical education programs to the Bureau of Indian Education. Why would you do that? If it's the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, all means all. So why are you separating it out? Divisive. Office of the Special... Oh, this one's going to piss me off, I know. The Office of Special Education Rehabilitative Services, the OSERS. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, OSERS, houses nearly 24 programs ranging from funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Act, the IDEA, and the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, to the Special Olympics funding and the American Printing House for the Blind. Yes, it does. Most IDEA funding should be converted into a no-strings formula block grant targeted at students with disabilities and distributed to local education agencies by Health and Human Services Administration for community living. No fucking way. No fucking way. No. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Transfer the vocational rehabilitation grants for Native American students to the Bureaus of Indian Education. So again, no. Phase out earmarked for a variety of special institutions as originally envisioned. To the extent that OSERS supports federal efforts to enforce our laws against discrimination of individuals with disabilities, those assets should move to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice, the one you want to get rid of as well? Cool. Along with the Office for Civil Rights. Office of Civil Rights, but you don't want to talk about gender ideology and critical race theory? And then you want to lump that with special needs kids? Fuck all the way off. Fuck off. Right here on this part right here, y'all can fuck off with this entire document. Absolutely not. You want no. Office for Post-Secondary Education. The next administration should work with Congress to eliminate or move OPE programs to ETA to the Department of Labor. Education. Do you see what they're saying? That your education, the only reason you need it is to learn how to fucking work. That's it. not to find out who you are, not to discover hidden talents, not to do what you love, to become a fucking workhorse. No, I don't agree. I don't agree with this at all. None of it. There's none of it I agree with. Thank you for the ice cream. I appreciate you. Funding to institutions should be block granted. Oh. Funding to institutions should be block granted and narrowed to historically black colleges and universities and tribally controlled colleges. No. Move programs deemed important to our national security interests to the Department of State. Again, nope. Institution of Education Sciences, the IES. Move the ED Statistical Office, the National Commission of Education Statistics, the NCES, to the Department of Commerce Census Bureau. If Congress believes the federal government can play a valuable research role, those research centers can move to the National Science Foundation. If Congress decides to maintain IES as an independent agency, it needs to address major governances and management issues to keep it from being a productive contributor to the knowledge base related to the teachings and learnings. So they're basically saying, yeah, we want to get rid of the Department of Education, and the only thing we need for federal funding is just to keep statistics and research. Office of the Federal Student Aid, FSA. This affects so many people. It's affected me when I was in college. The next administration should completely reverse the student loan federalization of 2010 and work with Congress to spin off FSA and its student loan obligations to a new government corporation with professional governance management. Right here, fuck Betsy DeVos. Fuck her all the way. She was head of the Department of Education under Trump and was one of the richest son of a bitches in Michigan, period. DeVos Hospital. Oh, thank you for the heart, Derek. I appreciate you. And she wants to get rid of all this with student loans and make people accountable because she was a predatory lender. No, the only reason she got hired is because she owned student loan fucking companies. The conflict of interest drove me fucking insane. I can't stand her being from Michigan. I don't like her at all because she's a rich bitch who all her kids were rich bitches, never had a fucking day of work in their damn life. Yet she ran the Department of Education to tell people who are lower income that you don't need an education. And that she is behind this 100%. Her name may not be directly on this. It is 100% behind it though, because she owned student loan companies that were predatory. And when student loans got discharged, she was pissed because she couldn't rake in the fucking interest. Oh, I can't stand. With statutory charge, sorry. Sometimes I get heated. With a statutory charge that it preserved the federal student loan portfolio for the benefit of the taxpayers and students, this new entity would be one, professionally governed by an agency and a head of board of trustees appointed by the president. And guess who that would probably be? Betsy DeVos. Oh, thanks for the heart, Sabine. I appreciate you. And again, this is talking about trends. It goes right back to chart 2 on 320. It's the same damn thing of the reading and the math scores. And it shows it. And again, you see the upticks and you see like the hills and the valleys from 1990s all the way to 2019 and then boom in 2022 because of pandemic. It was COVID. Same shit. The same shit. They're on page 328 if you want to look at the actual graphs. Now, this one on page 329 is long-term trends for 9 and 13-year-olds. It's stayed consistent. Math score averages, 13-year-olds and 9-year-olds. Still stayed fairly consistent and gone up. With the advice and consent of the Senate, funded by the annual appropriations from Congress, and 3 operated by professional managers, federal loans would be assigned directly to the Treasury Department, which would manage collections and defaults. Right there. It would go to the Treasury Department. And guess who he would also probably opt in for the Treasury Department? Betsy DeVos. Right there. You can't default. Trust it. If you go through this whole thing, that bankruptcy is like a hell of a thing, but apparently one of the things you cannot do, was not aware you can't discharge student loans in bankruptcy. Did you know that? Because people took advantage of it, I guess, during the 90s. And like, they would go to school and they wouldn't want to be held accountable. So people said, okay, you can file bankruptcy, but your college tuition never gets rolled into that. And that is because of fucking boomers. Fucking boomers. It's always fucking boomers. So you talk about a whole, first of all, college was $3 goddamn when boomers went to school, okay? And then they just, we'll file bankruptcy and I won't have to worry about it and I could wrap my student loan, because it is one thing apparently you can't. The more you know. The new Federal Student Loan Authority would manage the loan portfolio, handle borrower relations, administer loan applications and disbursements, monitor institutional participation and accountability issues, and issue regulations. So you want them to be more accountable and you want to issue regulations for the Treasury Department, but you don't want to do it federally, but it should be with the state only after you've appointed somebody. Just talking out their ass. Office for the Civil Rights, OCR. OCR should move to the Department of Justice. The federal government has an essential responsibility to enforce civil rights protections, but Washington should do it through the Department of Justice federal courts. The OCR and DOJ should be able to enforce only through litigation. Girl, what the hell? I'm just seeing how much longer this is. This is a very, very long chapter. Yeah, this... Oh, thank you for the heart. I appreciate you. Yeah, this is a lot. This is a lot. I'm going to see where we are. 328. Go back up. Where are we? Sorry, I lost my spot. Now I'm scrolling down. I don't have my books in front of me this time. I'm actually online. So that's Department of Agriculture. I went way too far back. So when we started on page Okay, it started at we went from 319. Now we're on 320, 327, 28, 29. Yeah. So that's the last one that's where we're gonna stop, guys, because like I said, I've got this, I guess, a wonky thing in my eye. I almost feel like I'm getting like a migraine or something. But I want to read this last part. The Office for Civil Rights, OCR. The OCR should move to the Department of Justice. The federal government has an essential responsibility to enforce the civil rights protections, but Washington should do through the Department of Justice and federal courts. The OCR and DOJ should be able to enforce only through litigation. Okay. So that is where we're going to stop. That is the top of page 330. I do not read on Wednesdays, but I will be back on Thursday. And the goal, pending everything else is happening, because this, what I love to do, work-life balance, got to make sure I have to do all that first. So the goal is 11 o'clock on Thursday. That's the goal. So I'm going to leave you that with there, and just... It just gets worse. It just gets worse. I can't even say anymore. It just gets worse. So I appreciate, again, I will, if you've missed any of this, I will upload this to my YouTube, and I do those in succession. So it'll say like Reading Project 2025 out loud. It'll say today's date, 9/3, and it'll say the pages of it. Oh, meow, meow, meow. Look at you. Look, DJ Glasses Halo. You're amazing. So I will be back to reading it, guys. Sorry, and hopefully, pray for, I don't know what's happening with my eye, but she's a twitching right now. So I'm going to go, but I will be back Thursday at 11. That's Mountain Standard Time. I will upload this to my YouTube channel if you've missed this, so you can listen at your leisure. I will be working on summaries forever, just literally forever. So I appreciate you all. Have a great night. Stay safe, and I will see you on Thursday.